This is me sharing with you some great content on the drastic mistakes that people make doing virtual training. And number one is get your position right. And by position, I mean where you are in the room and what people can see behind you. Now, you've heard me talk about it before when I'm saying you can show credibility with your books and things like that behind you. Great. This is not what I mean. What I'm meaning is, bottom line, have a wall or a bookcase or something solid right behind you so that people can't actually walk behind you or do anything. And the reason I say this is because of a drastic story that happened this last week when I was training. One of my delegates was at the front of the room, and by that I mean she had her lounge area and her dining room area and even part of her kitchen open plan visible behind her. So she had most of the house behind her for everyone to see. And while she was facing us, of course, on the training, her partner walked behind her into the room, and she didn't even realize he was there because she was facing us. And I kid you not, this is drastic. He walked to the laundry rack, which is not a great look to have behind you when training or in training at all, but there was plenty of washing on the laundry rack drying. And I kid you not, he took off his pants, selected another pair of pants, was down to his undies, and continued to get changed in front of all of us. So, of course, we could all see the little videos available. And he literally went down to his undies, took a new pair of clean pants, put them on, and we were all just horrified watching this, going, this can't be happening. It was hysterical. And bless her, the poor delegate that was in the room had no idea that this was even happening behind her. So yes, I do have it all fully recorded, but no, I will never show anyone. This is not one of those that's going to go viral, because I have too much respect for my client and too much respect and integrity for this poor delegate who had no idea her partner was getting undressed behind her. So, rule one, back to get your position right. It is safest if you have something straight behind you that people cannot walk around. Make sure that you don't have a whole lounge room visible, unless you're going to lock the doors or something and make sure that nobody comes in, or you have nobody to come into the room. That's a good idea. Number two is a professional start. And I mean that when we do live training, I tell everyone, we need to have at least an hour, and you want to be there, you want to set up the room, you want to make it look great, you want everything to be fantastic. The same goes for virtual training. Don't get slapdash and reduce that time frame. Don't think, I can roll out of bed 10 minutes before, start the Zoom, bring up the PowerPoint, and off we go. Not great. You want to make sure that your PowerPoint's playing beautifully, smoothly. For this morning session that I did, I had an embedded video. So I wanted to check the embedded video. Is it playing? Is the sound good? Things like that, so that I can breathe and go, great, I know it's all going to be perfect. You also want to have everything ready. You don't want to still be opening your PowerPoint and things like that while you've got delegates waiting for you. So it's a professional look. Make sure that you have a really professional start at the beginning. Number three is use a record prompt. Now, it's a good idea to record your sessions, as it's great. You can go back over them and see what worked well and what you did, and constantly improve and give yourself feedback, things like that. But use a record prompt. And by prompt, I mean, even if it's something as simple as a post-it note, stuck in your space somewhere on your screen, anything like that, that says, am I recording? And the reason I say this is really practical. If people are going off into a breakout room and you're going to stop recording, I always pause the recording. You want to make sure that, because if it's going to be for 5 minutes that they're in the breakout room, you don't want your audio to record for 5 minutes and you not, have any sound there, and it's not going to record the breakout room. So make sure that you're telling yourself, am I recording? So that as soon as they come back from the breakout room, you go, I need to press pause, because it's easy to make mistakes when you're thinking about how to bring them all back, and are they back, and we're going to start the discussion. You want to make sure, have I paused, am I recording? So if you have a prompt like that, when you have put them into breakout rooms, you're going to be able to get it right. Okay? Number 4, never trust your screen. Never trust your screen. And by that I mean, just because you can't see yourself on the video doesn't mean you aren't there. You don't want to yawn or sit back or do anything even worse. This I really learned. It was a few years ago, and I had a virtual conference for my trainers, and we had an incredibly high profile speaker was going to do a virtual session for us, and she's well renowned in the industry. So it shows it happens to the best of us, because she obviously didn't realize that we could see her, and she thought it was just her screen sharing. And so she was leaning back, she was scruffling her hair around, she was picking her teeth at one time. It was drastic. And at the beginning I thought, gosh, this is a really casual approach that she's got. And then I realized that she actually didn't know that we could see her. So I quickly had to text her and hope she got the text saying, my goodness, do you realize that we can actually see? And she was mortified when she realized. So my key thing is, never trust your screen. Think that as long as you are doing it, you are visible, and think that everything you say is going to be audible and could be being recorded. Make sure that your body language is great. You're always thinking, I could be seen, I could be seen. Because just because those little thumbnail videos have disappeared doesn't mean you can't be seen. So just it's better to be safe than sorry. Number 5. Gently encourage delegates to broaden their virtual culture. Now, what do I mean by virtual culture? You'll find that different groups have more or less familiarity with virtual training and their culture. They're used to certain things. So one group I had last week were a call center, and they hadn't had training like this before, and it was completely new to them, and their culture was really, really casual. So it was quite amusing. In the first session, I had a lady who was in her dressing gown. So literally she said, oh, it's quite cold, and she was sitting in a big furry dressing gown, which was comfortable. And I had another one who had a puppy on her lap, and she was like, oh, this is, Zach, or whatever the puppy was called, and she introduced us all. So a very casual culture. But they also didn't know to mute themselves and things like that. So I had to guide them and teach them how to do that, because it wasn't part of their radar. Whereas the group I had this morning have met that way for a long time, and their culture is very much mute immediately and only do chat. So when I was asking them questions, they very much culturally just went to, you just type, you just type, you just type. And so then I had to encourage them and say, okay, now we're going to do a discussion. And so I'm going to unmute you, please contribute. And that was new for them. And some of them weren't on video. Some of them were just black screen, whereas others felt more comfortable to be on video. So that's what I mean by their virtual culture. You need to gently encourage engagement in the areas that you want to focus on. Okay? Number 6, don't do a content dump. Just as in live training, there's nothing worse than covering too much and then drowning in content and being lecture style far too much. You want to do even less of a content dump when it's virtual. And by that I mean really think of, what am I going to teach, and then how can I make it interactive? How can I make it teach? Better to teach a little bit and make it stick. So to give you an example, in this morning session, I was doing managing difficult customers for one of my clients. And so I taught them some techniques, and then I showed a video and got them to look for those techniques or how they could have been used in the video. So that it was really a small piece of content with a small learning, a video, and then we discussed it and looked at the techniques from the video. So it was a good way to get a small amount of information rather than, an hour of solid content on here's how to deal with difficult people. Okay, so that was number 6. Number 7, don't overdo the same interaction tool. I say this because I was on a training last week from a gentleman in the States, and he only did polls. For the entire time, he had set up polls, and he just asked us poll question, poll question, poll question. And admittedly, it was every 5 or 10 minutes. It was a different poll question, but he didn't vary that up. There was no chat box, there was no contribution, there were no breakout rooms. It was poll, poll, poll. And I thought, oh, that's overdoing the same interaction tool. Number 8, give delegates a reason to come back after a quick comfort break. Now, if it's a short session, an hour and a half or 2 hours, I don't give a comfort break. I don't think it's really necessary. But if you're doing a session of 3 hours, then a comfort break is necessary. And I use fun things like brain teasers. So at the beginning, I show them how to engage the left and right hemisphere of the brain, and I give them a brain teaser. And then I say, come back to me after 10 minutes and I'll give you another brain teaser. So they all want to be back in time in order to get the brain teasers because they love that. Number 9, timing is everything. So really important that you keep to time, and you have even less flexibility than in live training. In live training, if you say you're going to finish at 4:30 and you go to 4:35, people aren't really going to crucify you because of it. They're like, okay. Whereas in virtual training, I'm finding that people really have scheduled their day. And so if your training is 9 to 11 in the morning, you find that at 11, they're moving on to something else and they have to go to a meeting or they've scheduled something. So you don't want to go to 11:15 because some of them have to say, sorry, I have to go, I have to leave, things like that. So make sure your timing is really key because it's professional. And you also want to give them the opportunity to ask a few questions at the end if they want to. You don't want to cram your content in it to the end and then say, sorry, I've got to go, our time is up. Okay. And number 10, give it time to buffer. And by buffer, I'm using that word just to mean when Zoom or the particular virtual software that you've used, when you've ended the recording and it needs that time to either load up to the cloud or to save onto your computer, whatever you've chosen for it to do, you need it to get it time to do that. And I say that because I've made the mistake of saying, oh no, I have to move on with something else, I'll do that later. And I actually lost that recording. I don't quite know where it went to. I need to give that more thought and time. Whereas if you allow it time to buffer, it automatically saves and goes and you're going to be able to find it again. And you always want to have that recording handy. So I tend to know not to schedule anything else. And I also want to go, decompress after it, think about how I went, think about if there's anything I could have done better, go and have a cup of tea, be good to yourself for a bit because you've probably done a really intense, great session in the session that you ran. And it's safest to let it do its thing, upload, do whatever it needs to. So do give yourself a little bit of time at the end. Okay, so those were 10 tips to make sure you're not making drastic mistakes. When drastic mistakes do happen, we've got to dust ourselves up, get up, laugh about it. It happens to all of us. If there's something that can go wrong at some stage, some things do, and they stretch us, and they're mistakes we then have learned. So we got to be a little bit easy on ourselves and say, I'm constantly improving and getting better and stretching, and hey, this is stretching your growth. So those are 10 tips. I know they will save you from making the same mistake.